Ever get that feeling maybe when you're scrolling through news feeds or just chatting with people that everything just feels heavy, like the world's teetering on the edge?
Oh, absolutely. That sense of pervasive negativity, it's definitely widespread, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's almost like our default has become looking for the potential problems everywhere.
exactly. And, the material we're diving into today is from this really interesting YouTube video transcript.
Mm.
It puts forward this idea that maybe it's not just a feeling. Maybe it's like a toxic lens
Hmm.
that kind of warps how we see things, our lives, the future, everything.
And what's fascinating about this source, I think, is that it doesn't just point out the problem, it offers a fundamentally different viewpoint.
Okay.
It suggests that despite all the challenges, the ones we're all very aware of, the basic direction of the future is actually good, positive. So, our mission today really is to explore that pretty radical idea. We'll pull apart the arguments from the transcript. And it draws on a lot, physics, psychology, neuroscience, even consciousness theory, metaphysics.
Wow, okay. That's quite a mix. It's definitely a shift in perspective.
Mm.
And maybe, I don't know, a bit of a relief to even consider. Because
Hmm.
personally, I've definitely had those moments where the constant negativity just feels crushing.
Hmm.
And you do start wondering, isn't there another side to this?
Yeah.
It can feel a bit isolating sometimes. If
Yeah.
you're not totally dialed into the doom and gloom, it's almost like you're missing something everyone else gets.
Well, and that feeling that you're sort of out of step with the main narrative.
Yeah.
The source actually touches on that. It notes this tendency, even you see it in independent media sometimes, to kind of lean into the more fear-based stuff.
Right.
But the core idea here, the central argument, is that our focus, it isn't just passive, it's actively shaping what we experience.
Okay, let's really unpack that because that's a big claim. The transcript says pretty directly, wherever you put your attention, that's where you're creating.
Yeah.
What does that actually look like day to day?
Well, think about it like this. The source uses the example of, say, financial stress.
Hmm.
If your mind is just constantly churning with thoughts of lack, focusing on what you don't have,
Yeah.
that becomes your dominant frequency, your energy.
Okay.
The suggestion instead is to intentionally shift that focus. Put your attention on the feeling of prosperity, what you actually want to create financially.
Uh-huh.
And it's the same idea with difficult relationships. Instead of replaying the fights, the negativity over and over.
It's easy to do.
Oh, totally. Instead, you'd focus on the qualities you actually want in that relationship. Connection, understanding, maybe compassion, stuff like that.
So wait, does that mean the problems themselves aren't entirely bad? Could they actually be useful somehow, like a first step?
Precisely. That's exactly how the transcript frames it. Problems are powerful clarifiers.
Clarifiers. How so?
Well, they shine a spotlight on what you don't want. And by doing that, they implicitly reveal what you do want, what you desire instead.
Okay. Okay.
And it's that desire when you really focus on it, when you almost broadcast it, as the transcript puts it, through your thoughts and feelings. That's what sets a process in motion.
What kind of process?
The source talks about consciousness or maybe a unified field, something underlying everything that starts to organize events, circumstances to align with that focused desire.
That sounds a bit like, when you start thinking about buying a certain type of car and suddenly you see it everywhere.
Exactly. Or the answer to something you've been puzzling over just pops into your head seemingly out of nowhere. That's the kind of synchronicity the transcript is getting at.
Okay.
It's this idea that when our internal focus is clear and, importantly, consistent, the external world starts reflecting that back. It brings opportunities, solutions, people into your experience that match that focus.
Right. Now, here's the part I found really interesting, maybe a little counterintuitive. The transcript claims you can't actually solve a problem by just endlessly thinking about the problem because they exist on different frequencies. Can you explain that frequency idea a bit more?
Sure. Think of it like tuning an old radio.
Yeah.
If you're tuned into the frequency that's just static, that's the problem. You're never going to hear the music, right?
Right.
Which is the solution.
No matter how loud you turn up the static.
Exactly. You can analyze the static all day long. It won't turn into music. The key is to deliberately change the dial. Tune into the frequency of the music, which in this analogy is the feeling, the reality of the desired outcome.
Okay, that makes sense. Constantly dissecting the problem just keeps you locked onto that static frequency. And this ties into that whole belief, emotion, action cycle the transcript mentions, doesn't it?
It does directly. It draws on, basic behavioral psychology principles, our beliefs, the things we hold to be true deep down, they shape our thoughts.
Mm.
Those thoughts then trigger specific emotions. And those emotions drive our actions, what we actually do or don't do. And ultimately, our actions create our results.
And the results then tend to confirm the original belief, creating a loop.
Precisely. It becomes a self-reinforcing cycle.
So the real leverage point, the place to make a change, according to this, is at the level of belief. If you want a different reality, different results, you've got to examine and maybe shift those foundational beliefs.
Yes, and that loops right back to not constantly focusing on the problem, because doing that just reinforces the negative beliefs associated with it.
Right, it keeps the cycle going in the wrong direction.
Now, shifting gears slightly, the transcript also paints this really compelling picture about abundance, sort of a counter-narrative to the scarcity we often hear about.
Yeah, this part was surprising to me. It actually states that, globally speaking, we have more financial resources right now, more diverse forms of currency. It mentions things like Bitcoin, real estate businesses, and just greater overall asset value than ever before in history.
And it extends beyond just money. The source makes the point that while there are more people on the planet than ever, and arguably a growing number of those people are becoming more conscious, more awake, you could say.
Okay.
And think about health and well-being, too. There's just an incredible array of tools and resources available now. Things like functional medicine, stem cells, advanced diagnostics, alongside more ancient wisdom practices, too. The options are huge.
Okay, if all this abundance is out there, financially, relationally, health-wise, why doesn't it always feel that way? Why doesn't it feel accessible to everyone?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The transcript suggests that grabbing this abundance, as it puts it, requires a conscious desire for it, first of all.
Okay.
And crucially, it requires relaxing that focus on lack, on what's missing.
So it's our focus again.
It seems to boil down to that, yes. Our ingrained tendency, maybe from our evolutionary past, is to scan for threats, for scarcity. The transcript playfully calls it our Neanderthal brain.
Okay. The survival instinct.
Right. It's constantly looking for what could go wrong, what we don't have enough of. And that focus, that energy, creates a kind of block, energetically speaking, to receiving the abundance that is available.
That really resonates. It feels like we're almost hardwired to see the negative first. But the transcript contrasts this, doesn't it? It hints at a different kind of wisdom. It mentions scripture in passing and this idea of a larger intelligence, a kind of superorganism maybe,
Yes.
that's actually working for our good.
Yes. The underlying message there seems to be that there's an inherent intelligence, a supportive structure to reality, if you will. And the main thing getting in the way of us tapping into that support, into that abundance.
Yes, our own focus.
Well, specifically, our doubt and fear, according to the source. By constantly dwelling on problems, by feeding the fear, we amplify that doubt, and we inadvertently pinch off the flow of the very resources and opportunities we're seeking.
Okay, so taking that perspective, how do we then interpret the really big, messy global challenges we see playing out right now? Wars, economic instability, climate issues. The transcript has a pretty unique take on this, calling it a kind of detoxification.
Yeah, the idea is that maybe these large-scale disruptions represent old systems, outdated ways of thinking, old belief structures that are breaking down, they're unwinding.
Like a collective clearing out?
Sort of. And while that process can look and feel chaotic, unsettling, even painful, the perspective offered is that it can ultimately pave the way for growth, both personal and collective. A necessary breakdown before a breakthrough.
But the transcript also gives a strong warning, doesn't it?
Correct.
About getting too caught up in watching the breakdown. It uses terms like political porn, chaos porn, collapse porn.
Right. It cautions against getting overly invested, almost addicted to those narratives that constantly highlight negativity and potential collapse, which seem quite prevalent in some corners of the media landscape.
Yeah, you definitely step in.
The suggestion isn't to be ignorant, but to consciously choose not to let that dominate your attention, to shift your focus more towards your own life, your own sphere of influence, what you can actually do and create.
Why is that shift so important?
Well, the reasoning seems to be that becoming hyper-fixated on all the external negativity just feeds that fear state we talked about. It can feel disempowering.
Right, like you're just a spectator to a disaster.
Exactly. And from that state, it's much harder to recognize opportunities or create positive change, even in your own life. So it's about being aware, yes, but not letting yourself get consumed by it.
Okay, so practically then, how do we actually do that? How do we take control and start shifting this ingrained focus away from fear?
The transcript emphasizes it's an active, conscious practice. It's about learning to ignore those fear-based thought patterns when they arise.
Ignore them. Just push them away.
Less pushing away, maybe, and more just. Not giving them your energy, not engaging with them, like choosing not to tune into that static frequency. And the idea is, by consistently choosing not to feed those thoughts, you weaken those old neural pathways, you starve them of attention. And instead, you deliberately cultivate thoughts rooted in, say, faith or excitement about possibilities, or just listening to your own intuition.
The transcript gives some really concrete current examples too. Like
Yeah.
it mentions things like corporate influence in politics or the ongoing Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Yes.
And it suggests, okay, be aware that these things are happening, but then consciously redirect your focus. Shift your attention towards the outcome you actually want.
Right, like focusing on a vision of a world where, say, every child genuinely has a good life, or where governance is truly noble and serves the people. The transcript even uses that aspirational Wakanda image as a shorthand.
So it's not about pretending the problems don't exist.
Not at all. It's about where you place your creative energy. Do you place it on analyzing the problem or on energizing the solution, the desired future?
And by focusing on those positive visions,
Yeah.
what does that achieve?
The idea presented is that you become like a transmission mechanism for positive vibes, as the source puts it. You're adding that positive, solution-oriented energy into the collective consciousness, influencing things in a more constructive direction.
And this comes back to personal responsibility again, doesn't it?
Yeah.
This core idea that our individual experience is deeply tied to our own internal state, our beliefs, our feelings.
Exactly. Whether we're operating from what the source calls a powerful state, centered, trusting, or from a primal state, which is essentially driven by fear and reaction.
That internal state determines how we perceive and respond to the world.
And according to this view, what we tend to attract more of, the transcript even uses the YouTube algorithm as a metaphor for this broader principle.
How so?
Well, you know how the algorithm shows you more of what you click on, what you watch, what you engage with.
Right, it learns your preferences.
In a similar way, this perspective suggests that the universe, or consciousness, responds to our focus. We get more of what we consistently pay attention to, whether that's problems or possibilities.
Okay. The transcript also uses examples like the political polarization, say, between Biden and Trump supporters, not to take sides, but as an example of energies maybe to disengage from.
Yes, exactly. Less about who is right or wrong, and more about recognizing the energy of conflict or division itself and choosing not to feed it with your attention. Instead, you could use it to clarify, for yourself, what qualities you do want in leadership. Honesty, wisdom, unity, whatever it might be for you.
And it applies this to other figures or entities too, right? Like acknowledging someone like Bill Gates's past work, maybe, without getting stuck focusing on current controversies or perceived negativity.
Precisely. It's a conscious release. Same idea for maybe the military-industrial complex or big oil or whatever large entity might trigger negative feelings. Acknowledge its existence, perhaps, but don't let it dominate your mental real estate.
Don't get pulled into the drama. It uses the analogy of someone dealing with addiction.
Right. Like an addict hitting rock bottom. You wouldn't necessarily dive into their drama. You'd focus on your own well-being, your own work.
And the work here means
In this context, the work seems to be that consistent effort. Tune out the fear, tune out the noise, the static, and keep intentionally focusing your thoughts and feelings on the outcomes, the reality you want to experience and create.
so if we do need to address problems, tackle challenges in the world, the suggestion is to come at it from a different place.
Yes, from a place of non-fear, from a place of belief in a positive future, rather than reacting against a negative present.
So instead of just fighting against things, fighting against war, fighting against pollution, fighting against corruption,
You proactively focus on what you want to create instead. You pour your energy into the vision of, say, harmony with the planet, noble government, freedom of expression, privacy, stable finances for everyone, whatever your positive vision includes.
and the idea is that that positive solution-oriented focus is what actually sparks the solutions. It becomes the catalyst.
That's the core hypothesis, that when enough focus shifts towards these positive visions, the innovative solutions, the breakthroughs maybe in health, environment, governance, technology, they naturally start to emerge and gain traction.
The transcript wraps up with a really powerful analogy, drawing on history, the story of Moses leading the Exodus. How does that fit into this whole framework?
Well, in that analogy, Pharaoh and Egypt represent the old systems, the oppressive structures, the negative ways of thinking and being that we collectively or individually want to leave behind.
Okay. The state of lack, maybe, or fear.
Could be. And the crucial point the transcript draws from the story is that the focus wasn't meant to be on constantly battling Pharaoh. The primary focus, the driving force, was meant to be on the promised land.
On the positive vision of the future they were heading toward.
Exactly. Keep your eyes on the prize, essentially.
Now, the source acknowledges this might sound a bit, well, Pollyanna-ish, maybe. Overly optimistic or naive to some people.
It does acknowledge that. But the argument it makes is that creating something genuinely new, a better system, a better reality, doesn't happen primarily by constantly fighting the old thing. It happens by shifting focus, withdrawing energy from the old, and pouring it into building and energizing the new vision.
So it's less about resistance and more about creation.
That seems to be the essence of it. And the source adds a personal note, saying their own life experience backs this up, things improving as they've applied this principle.
But it also anticipates doubt,
Right.
right? Like, what if my Pharaoh isn't gone? What if the problems are still right here? It uses the example of the Hebrews in the desert wanting to go back.
Right. It uses that to illustrate that this isn't necessarily a one-time fix. It
No.
requires consistent application, especially when things get tough. Doubts will arise. The pull of the old patterns, the slavery of the old mindset can be strong.
So persistence is key.
Persistence in shifting the focus, yes. And the final encouragement really is for you, the listener, not just to take this as gospel, but to maybe test the hypothesis. Experiment with consciously shifting your own focus in some area of your life and see what happens.
So if we were to boil it all down, the really simple but maybe profound takeaway is what? Believe in the future.
Essentially, yes. To cultivate a genuine belief, a certainty even in the underlying goodness of the future, and to consciously choose your inputs. Meaning leverage resources, read things, watch things, listen to people that make you feel good, feel hopeful, feel empowered, not just things that make you feel informed, but also anxious or fearful.
Because that feeling state matters.
Immensely, according to this perspective. Operating from that place of feeling good, of trust and faith, helps you navigate whatever challenges do come up more effectively. It helps you stay aligned with moving towards your own personal promised land.
It's a compelling message that even in situations that seem historically impossible, like the Hebrews facing Pharaoh, that immense power imbalance, a positive outcome is still possible through faith and that deliberate shift in focus.
That's the ultimate hope offered, yes.
So maybe that leaves us with a final thought for you listening right now. What is your personal promised land? What positive vision are you aiming for? And perhaps more immediately, what Pharaoh, what negative pattern, fear, or external focus can you consciously choose to start walking away from today?